Now, Microsoft slams as cloud tension boils. Okay, Microsoft can go home. Apple can go home. The two companies that are the masters of the cloud are Amazon and Google. That's it. They understand it. They are it. That's it. I mean, Apple.
Yeah, no. Everybody's going to try and compete with them, but honestly, I tend to agree with you. By the end of this decade, the cloud will be gobbled up by Google and Amazon. They're just going to own it. There isn't anybody who really gets it, the whole idea, and everybody else is playing catch up at this point. And the reality is, Amazon has the infrastructure, Google has the tentacle clout everywhere in the web to just kind of aggregate people towards them. The only thing that would be scarier at this point would be if Amazon and Google start working collectively as a singular entity. That would be kind of scary, actually. But yeah. There is some good news though on the Windows Microsoft front side. Microsoft Store, you know, it's what you expected. It's going to be all those Metro apps, you know, basically that Windows desperately needs to not completely flop.
You know what? I'm for a Windows 8 version that's like Metro, because there's going to be a shitload of people that want that simplified OS. I just pray we go back then. Okay, Microsoft, that's great. But then, all right, let's go back to the 90s, where we had server software, workstation software, and retail software.
Well, and there is still the fallback to desktop. The problem I'm seeing, especially for web stuff and yada yada, I mean, the reality is on a slate, the best way to interface with the slate Metro style UI is with a touch screen. And there's things that work well. There's a reason web pages and mobile web pages are different, and the same thing's true with applications. I mean, the reality is the way you interface with the thing is just different. And the problem I'm really seeing in Windows 8, and this is what, and this isn't going to be solved overnight. Basically, Windows 8 is going to be the beta for this. Is going to be the fact that they're trying to do everything from both hands. They're trying to make everything work under one UI rather than both, and it's not going to be elegant. It's not going to be done well. You're going to be in a boxing match with the machine all the time to get stuff done. The tools to allow web pages to adapt to it aren't going to be there if you're using Internet Explorer.
But hey, let me say this though: the move that Microsoft is saying they're not going to support legacy moving forward, you know, they're not. In other words, they're not going to have the binary problem of running legacy on ARM. It's kind of good, you know.
I don't see how they could. I mean, they almost have to draw that line in the sand.
Well, all they're going to do going forward, I bet, is have like a universal binary going forward for Metro, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Microsoft is playing it smart in that hardware's done this, by the way. I mean, the way hardware and software is that back in the old days, we used to buy these expensive computers to do very simple tasks. We had overkill on hardware and very low-powered software utilizing that hardware. And, for examples, we would buy workstations that people would simply use a word processor on. Now, and now hardware has converged, you know, and I got into a debate about this. Is that, look, hardware and software have come to a place where we used to be so segmented, but now all those segments have become one general gigantic demographic, which consumes a large portion of the.
Oh no, and I agree with you, and I think that's going to be a side effect of what Microsoft's doing there. And I agree with you, but I don't think that's why they're doing it. I think they're doing.
Well, it makes sense because, see, the way hardware is gone is like now software is getting simpler for people who want to have it, right? And it's actually kind of cool where we're bringing the ideology of I need to make an operating system run on something that has a battery to make it efficient, and then guess what? We bring that efficiency to the desktop, which means we're computing much more efficient than lackadaisical than how we did in the mid-90s going up. We were very lackadaisical in software. As we got into multi-cores, we had to go back to efficiency because we're like, wow, we have this hardware, and how do we manage the efficiency? Because we're not doing this appropriately. And then we've built all these layers to also help that efficiency. And now we have this gigantic gray area that has consumed a huge space on either side, whether it's a consumer or a business. Now, there's always going to be niche markets.
You know what? Personally, and this drives me nuts. My personal opinion is that the idea of putting things in the it's a consumer, it's business box is just plain wrong. Because the reality is it doesn't matter. It's what type of computing are you doing, and that not necessarily has nothing to do with which one of those boxes you're in.
But you remember the day where we would buy a workstation that's new word processing.
I know. But I think the reason that Microsoft is drawing that line and doing that, even though it will have the benefit you're talking about, I think the real reason they're doing that is basically to salvage what they've done to the UI. They have to force everyone over to these Metro style things, so they kind of just have to go, well, everything's got to go this way.
Hey, but don't they? Maybe they see the writing on the wall. ARM is overtaking. I mean, ARM is now superior in mobile space. It will overtake Intel.
It's gonna overtake in the next version. The next version of ARM is supposed to be in the 3 gigahertz range.
I know, it's
quad core.
It's just that.
Yeah, it's desktop league. I'm sorry, it's desktop league.
I mean, in essence, you could say, I wouldn't say, maybe Jobs should have corrected himself on stage and said, we're not post PC, we're post Wintel. That's where we are. We are post Wintel. And that's actually completely obvious by the fact of what I was going to point out here about the good news about the Windows 8 store. And this is something that's really telling of the time, and that, like we're saying, we're post-Wintel, because the reality is the industry has moved on. The industry has moved on from allowing itself to be completely dependent on Microsoft and so on and other things. Basically, everything's just kind of moved on, and even Microsoft sees the writing on the wall because they put a clause in their Windows 8 marketplace. Basically the same thing Apple's done with theirs. Basically you have to comply with our terms of service. We have DRM, all of that stuff, yada yada. But they put a clause in there specifically for open source software, which says, unless, so you have to comply with all our terms of service, unless some portion of your software contains open source software. Basically, if you're using anything in your software that requires a GPL or an LGPL or a GPL2 or something that has to do with a license that would contradict with our terms of service, you're given amnesty. You don't have to comply with our terms of service to comply with that license. And that's really telling of the time we're in, that Microsoft, of all companies, would write that clause into something that is entirely in their control. It's like, of all the companies to stand up and go, we're not going to fight open source. It's like, whoa. I thought I was smoking something when I read that. I just posted it on Twitter. I thought that was pretty good. We're not post PC, we're post Wintel. That's a very good thing.
By the way, somebody also subscribed to Bit's Twitter feed. He posts some interesting things over the phone.
I know.
And depending on the shot, either me or him or
it also depends on my mood.
Yeah, occasionally though, you just disappear for a month. We're like, what do you know?
I'll disappear for a few days, and then all of a sudden I come back like,
The only thing that I will warn anybody who's going to follow Bit's Twitter feed, he has conversations with people, and it's not like a Google Plus conversation where you can see both sides of the conversation. You see him like shaking his finger proverbially at somebody, and you have no idea what they said. And half the time
you can see it if you click on the arrow, like on Twitter at least. I like how they do the ID threads now.
But no. You were having one conversation with somebody one time, and they were like had all their stuff private.
Oh shit!
I forget who it was, but it like drove me nuts. I'm like, great. Now I'm seeing one half of a great conversation, and I can't see the other side.